Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I'm delighted to introduce you to the two co-founders of Delphi Digital. We got Yan Liberman and Anil Lulla with us, and we've got Gabby, who is the founder and CEO of Yield Guild, which is one of the earlier investments we made out of Delphi Ventures, and certainly one of the ones that I think we're most excited about here. It's already having some pretty exciting real-world impact in a way that not many other projects are. So yeah, thank you for joining us, guys.
Hey, happy to finally be here.
So yeah, I guess
this has been months in the making. Yeah, damn.
That's right.
Excited to get into it. I guess, Gabby, to set the stage for us and kick it off, what is Yield Guild? Give us a high-level summary.
Sure. So Yield Guild Games, or YGG, is a play-to-earn gaming guild. So what that means is we invest into NFTs of different games and virtual worlds that have some sort of a play-to-earn component. That means you're earning some kind of token rewards for the games that you're playing. And these token rewards are usually basically cryptocurrency based. You can exchange them for ETH and eventually for fiat. So what we do is that we invest in games in such as Axie Infinity, where we came from and have the largest operations in, but also different games like Sandbox, Formula One, Delta Time, Illuvium, Zedrun, a few others. And yeah, we basically hand over the governance and the control of these games and the assets that we buy to our community and let them earn an income with it. And yeah, this is pretty much what we do.
Yeah, and I think Gabby, it'd be helpful to, before we even dive into your background, to kind of explain exactly who the audience and kind of exactly who your users are, right? It's not like I think it's important for everyone to understand that it's not just like the crypto people who are just trading and farming things on DeFi protocols. It's a whole new user base that you're bringing on into crypto.
Yeah, so DeFi has a reputation of basically just the same pool of users that are earning yield across different protocols. And what's pretty special about what we're doing is that I would say over 90% of our guild members are actually new to crypto. And this is because we offer them the experience of something they learn how to do, which is play a game. And they don't have to buy the assets. We invest in the assets. The guild owns the assets, and we basically lend these out to our players. So all these players start with is that I can play a game and earn money. And if you kind of open it to that kind of demographic, there's actually a lot more people that can just pick up a game like Axie Infinity, start playing, and then they learn blockchain as they go along. So this is pretty important because we've seen that if you start with the crypto side, it's a lot harder to onboard people. But if you start with, hey, want to play a game and earn some money in the process, you actually really widen your target demographic. And actually, most of the players that we have are from emerging markets, pretty much regular people who have good game experience, but not really, tech savvy or especially crypto savvy. So the countries that we are mainly operating in are the Philippines, Indonesia, India, Venezuela, and Brazil. And actually, the money that these players are earning from these games are pretty significant compared to how much they can earn in those respective countries.
Yeah, I think that's like the most important. Like I see Yield Guild in so many different ways, and I think we're gonna get through all those, throughout this pod. But I really do see in one way Yield Guild as this like next generation type university, right? Where instead of paying like a huge fee and huge textbooks cost and everything like that, you're actually getting paid because you also have a job, right? And I think that's such a fascinating aspect. I think throughout the pod, Piers, Yan, and I will really kind of express how excited we are about Yield Guild and why we've been so heavily involved in kind of like what you guys are working on. But I think maybe it's best to take a step back and give everyone some context and give everyone a little bit of your background, your story, and then we can slowly go into how Yield Guild even came about.
Sure. So my background is really as a game developer. Here in the Philippines, I was part of the team that made the first game back in 2003. 2014, I started a mobile game studio called Altitude Games. So we were making games for iOS and Android phones. In 2017, we heard about Ethereum and the concept of smart contracts. I'd heard about Bitcoin before, but the use cases were around remittance and fintech, which I really wasn't so interested in. So it was when we heard about the concept of basically programmable money, smart contracts, I got really interested. And we started researching this at the game studio to see how we could kind of integrate this into our games. And while we were doing this research, CryptoKitties came out. This is November 2017, and popularized the term non-fungible token. It brought down the Ethereum network then, and it showed that you can put in basically unique tokens on the blockchain. So this is really a very kind of aha moment for us being game developers. Now that we realize that you can put game items on the blockchain, which is kind of sovereign, the player owns them, not longer kind of directly tied to the game, and you can kind of take it with you wherever you go. That was really an eye-opening moment, and I've been kind of pushing the boundaries for NFTs ever since. So 2018, we started developing blockchain games. I released one called Battle Racers. In the last year, I was very heavily researching on different protocols related to NFT and DeFi. And I guess most importantly for this narrative, I started playing Axie Infinity in late 2018. Met one of the founders, Jiho, at one of the conferences, and then I invited him here in Manila to talk about blockchain games, and he lent me 3 Axies, and basically that's the rest is history.
Yeah, I think we have to almost pause here and just like pay homage to how incredible Axie and what an important piece Axie plays here. Obviously, Delphi and especially Yan and Paul from our team played a really big role in designing the AXS governance token. But maybe Yan, you can give some context as far as like I think very similar to Gabby, we fell down the Axie rabbit hole in 2017, 2018, and we saw something brewing there. And yeah, maybe Yan, you can dive into that real quick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was actually our when we first started, it was our first external consulting gig where we were asked to kind of look into the gaming space. And so this was in late 2018 where there was basically nothing except Axie. So, we can confidently say that nothing else that we looked at is still around at the time or at the current time. And Axie, was by far the game that we thought had the most promise, and it was live. We really actually enjoyed playing it. And so we contacted the team and as part of the just natural due diligence process to learn as much as we can about the game, and we continued to follow it. And thankfully they reached out in late 2019 to have us kind of help them design the token, and that was a really fun experience because we played the game way back when, and the idea of a token at the time was still it was something we imagined they were going to bring eventually, but it really kind of helped us wrap our minds around the whole idea of play to earn and what it can mean and how sustainable of a model it really becomes, especially as all of the in-game flows are basically accrued to the token, where rather than all the in-game spend in a normal game accruing to the equity of the company and really that's where all the value sits. Here you have a situation where as more users join, as more money is spent in the game, it all gets added back to the community pot, which is effectively used to incentivize additional adoption and reward token holders and kind of allows for a lot of unique mechanisms to engage with the user base. And so that was something we designed in late 2019, and then thankfully had the opportunity to lead the round in 2020 through our venture arm. But it's been really insane to watch, and especially as of late, their numbers have been nuts, and I know you guys have a really large role to play in that, so we'd love for you guys to expand on that.
Yeah, so we've been very active in Axie ever since we started Yield Guild, and we're doing what is called a scholarship program in the game, where we are breeding Axies and lending them out to players that is coming in, and that is definitely the leading cause of the explosive growth that Axie has been doing lately. So so just some really quick numbers. We have around 2,000 Axie scholars in Yield Guild. We have around 18,000 guild members overall, and these scholars have farmed over 18 million SLP, which is over $2 million. And the most amazing thing about that is that 90% of that has gone back to our players. So 70% goes to the player, 20% goes to the community manager that's handling them, and 10% goes back to the guild. So of the over $2 million generated, most of that kind of flows back to our players.
Yeah, that's that's incredible. I don't think people really understand the scale of those numbers, especially when you're talking to the people that those numbers are going to, right? If those revenues were going to crypto whales, they might be like, okay, this is a drop in the bucket, etc. But going to people in places like the Philippines, Venezuela, even small villages in India and everything like this, it's just like so massive. And I think it'd be great to go into some of these stories because you've introduced us to so many people whose lives Axie and Yield Guild have positively impacted, where to the point where in these conversations they're telling us that they go to sleep and wake up every morning praying that Axie and Yield Guild are there tomorrow, and it's such a heartwarming story. Like I don't know which stories you want to pick, but I'm sure you have a couple to go through here.
Yeah, it's just crazy how many stories really just come out of our community. Like for example, Cabanatuan City in northern Philippines is where kind of the earliest epicenter of Axie Infinity came out late last year because of the early lockdown, and we have a lot of players there, like of all ages. There is kind of a grandma and grandpa tending their store, and when there's no one in their store, they're just playing the game, and then they're able to use that to buy medicines. And we checked up on them recently, and they, through their SLP earnings, they were actually able to financially assist their daughter who had migrated to Canada for a better life. So it's kind of a crazy story where it's a reverse situation where the parents who are retired and kind of grinding Axie are helping their daughter who has moved to a better life. There are people who have bought food for the table, milk for their kids, a car, even two houses at the extreme end. It's just amazing how much basically a lot of these people have gotten from SLP. And the best thing, a kind of feedback cycle of people helping the scholarship program, and then they're able to earn some money. They actually start helping some of the other people in their vicinity. So they may start their own small scholarship program, or they may be investing in Axies for their family members to play, or they may be kind of paying for some of the immediate needs of their family. There is a super strong culture of pay it forward. Seeing is actually a very strong positive network effect of people helping people kind of get out of poverty and into basically upward mobility in life.
Yeah, and I think that's such a big role about it too. Is like when Yan, our team at Delphi, and I we were looking at this, even talking to investors like Mark Cuban about Axie and Yield Guild. There are a lot of it's almost like a big responsibility and duty, right? Where you want to make sure that this game is sustainable and this model is sustainable for the long term. So understanding that aspect of it is so key. And I think one obviously the most vital and important part about that is like community, right? So like you saw this with DeFi protocols, where even the strongest DeFi protocols, their community isn't as sticky as maybe you would have hoped. It comes in waves. But in a game like Axie and these other crypto games that obviously Piers has been diving a lot into, these communities are like almost become a little bit like cults, but they're way stickier than these other DeFi communities, or these other communities that might be might move based off where the yield is or something like this. You can't really fork, you can't do a Uniswap to Sushi Swap in Axie, right? You can fork the game, but you can't fork the community. Yeah, I mean it's pretty incredible to see that. I guess like what is it about crypto games, and Piers, feel free to jump in here as well, as like all these games that even with something like Illuvium that we're seeing right now, like the community has already become so strong, and this game isn't even out yet, right? Like what is it that makes that like happen, right? Like I've tried to, we discussed this so much inside the team, but I'd love to have a kind of like an open conversation here about it.
Yeah, Gabby, I don't know whether you want to jump in on that one. Would love to get some color around, like, the types of things you guys are looking for within these, up and coming games and virtual economies. Obviously, it's still pretty early days across the board. I think we can probably discuss some of the merits of this technology in gaming at length, which we'll get onto. But yeah, I would love to know, how you guys are sort of thinking about, what those target sort of virtual economies are and what that selection process looks like for you.
Okay, so we do look at a lot of different games to see which ones that we would like to invest in, and I guess the primary one is that there has to be some sort of like play to earn loop, right? That means there is some kind of reward from playing the game. So, for example, our community loves NBA Top Shot, but we would not invest in it as a guild because there's no yield component about it. We're not really set up as a guild to buy and sell or trade NFTs. We want to buy NFTs, and if we can, hold them forever and have our community just earn yield from it forever, right? So this is done. We did this first with Axie, and then we did this with League of Kingdoms. Most recently, we've invested in Zedrun and Splinterlands, and yeah, a few other games in between. And then when we buy this, we pair this with a community lead from basically someone from our community who's very passionate about the game. And yeah, they basically take control, and we want to hand off the day-to-day operations, playing the game, and governance over to our community. And one of the concepts we have is that we're creating a DAO of DAOs. So there's a DAO for each game, and with containing the assets and the yield that is in each game. So each game will have its own wallet. There's a token minted against it. So in our case, YGGLOK for League of Kingdoms. And then the players get to buy in the sub token, the sub DAO token, at basically our cost of acquiring the land. So instead of buying lands themselves, they are part owner of the YGG LOK estate. And then we hand over governance to our players. So they are pretty much free to run the game as they see fit. So so far, one governance proposal has passed. The community wanted to turn the yield, which was DAI, to CDAI or compound DAI, so it would still be earning yield while it was in the wallet. And I think the community is just starting to figure out what it means to have kind of blockchain-style governance in games such as League of Kingdoms, and it's an experiment that we're really interested in kind of pushing to the limit in all of the games that we're working with.
Super interesting. And then I guess I'd also love if you could give some color. Like, obviously you come from a more traditional game development background and you've been in the industry a long time, having built a number of mobile games. Can you comment at all on this shift towards these more sort of open virtual economies whereby, people are able to kind of participate in the economics of the value that they're helping create, right? If you can give some color on kind of the high level shift towards that from some of these perhaps larger game publishers and whatnot.
Yeah, so the most important concept is that these games with NFTs are driven by player-owned economies. And, we have had some instances of these in games before blockchain. So I guess most notably EVE Online, which has been around for, I think, almost 2 decades now, but it's always been either impossible or kind of gray market to cash out resources that you've had in game into basically real money. So with these player-owned economies, it's really your player base that owns a chunk of your economy, and you as the game developer, you're acting as the kind of facilitator of your own economy. So it's like your own little country with its own little economy, and you're creating basically the game experience that will allow this economy to grow. And yeah, we've seen this, I guess, most successfully with Axie so far, but I'm expecting other games to be able to build very interesting economies that people will be able to invest in as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, where the game is proactively making this feasible. Where, so thinking back to just like I've been a gamer for my entire life. So like the first kind of instance where I noticed that this element existed, but the game itself made it prohibitive was thinking back to like Diablo and Diablo 2, where in order to move, in order to kind of monetize the runes or any kind of assets that you pick up, you have to transfer gold to D2 JSP and basically use a third-party site to store your kind of wealth, and then other players would have to do it through there as well, and it created a lot of friction and made it really difficult. And for Blizzard, it kind of makes sense where they don't want to make it easy to store wealth across seasons. They'd rather have you restart and then commit all the time and kind of play there. Whereas right now, what you're seeing with these kind of games is, and even just like the play to earn model in general, is the way it's sustainable. It's in a handful of ways. So on one side, before the Axie token even launched, the way that it existed now is you have on one hand, on one of the kind of the transaction, you have users that, so basically when you play the game, you farm SLP, and that item is it's minted when you farm it, and then it's destroyed when you consume it. And so for certain players on who need it to breed and kind of all the future actions that'll involve it, it takes a while to farm. And so from your perspective, it's a lot easier to kind of buy some of it when you need it on an ad hoc basis to perform potentially more profitable actions, or if it's just easier for you to kind of go down that route and rather than farm it. And on the other hand, you have the users that can play the game and farm this resource, and the rate at which they're the yield that they kind of get by farming and selling this asset is really considerable relative to the kind of the wages they're able to earn. So you kind of have this geo arb of this geo wage arb where on both users are happy, because on one hand it would take too much time for one user to farm it, and on the other end it's actually very lucrative for users to spend their time to farm it, and you're able to actually facilitate that rather than normally make that a friction, as you've seen in previous games.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, and I think that's how play to earn works. And I think we did really good job in the play to earn documentary, which, by the way, we'll definitely put in the show notes. If anyone's listening and hasn't seen that, it's on YouTube. Gabby, the Axie team, Yield Guild, Delphi, and obviously Imparsis did such a great job on showing exactly the impact of that. And I think, Yan, maybe we should have a video of, you explaining just what you said in combination with that video, because I think that's like the full story right there. Yeah, I think, one of my, favorite parts about this is, going back to what I said earlier, as far as like this being, kind of a university where people are getting paid. So like the job aspect of this is so powerful too, right? Where, the future of work is like right in front of us. You obviously hear people like, Nepal talking about how everyone's gonna, have their own jobs and, not be working for companies, etc. It's amazing when, he says something like that and people think like, oh, wow, that's, that's gonna be a crazy at the end of this decade. I kind of laugh and think like this is happening right now with Yield Guild and, protocols like this, right? So Gabby, maybe I'm such a big fan of the Yield Guild team. Maybe talk about how that team came into shape, but also how your team is not going to be this like centralized fest of a bunch of your team isn't going to grow to like 50, 100 people over the next 6 months. It's actually going to just be a community driven effort, right? Yeah.
Sure. So Yield Guild, so there's 3 of us co-founders, and so one of my co-founders is an Anon dev called Isle of Moistness. So when I came into Axie late 2018, he was already there. And yeah, he was a community dev. So he actually makes amazing Discord bots and smart contracts. And last year during this time, we were actually learning how to yield farm for the first time. So this time last year, we were actually farming the Wi-Fi DAI 98.2 balancer pool, if you remember those days. And yeah, we were kind of learning yield farming from scratch in different protocols, not getting much sleep. Owl posted 2 double mystics on NFT5 for collateral, and I lent him 20 ETH, and he was yield farming on that. And at the same time, Beryl is a friend of mine from the crypto space, was really deep experience in fintech. So she was actually in the founding team of coins.ph, which is the #1 crypto wallet for a long time in the Philippines. and we were yield farming separately. And what happened was that when Axie started exploding in Cabanatuan City in the Philippines because of the lockdown, um, I thought, like, it was time to create an organized guild out of this and start it. And so the funny thing was, during kind of these DeFi summer last year, there was so much going on. I started becoming an NFT insurance agent for Urine, if you remember those times. And that was how I met the Delphi team. So Anil actually DM'd me out of nowhere on Twitter, and he's like, hey, I really love what you guys are doing, what you're doing. Like, way to go, like showing what NFTs can do. And Anil didn't know that I already had a pitch for a play to earn guild in my back pocket. So I asked for a call, and I targeted Delphi specifically because of two things. One, I knew that they designed the XS token. And second, in DeFi, when I was always heard about, oh, why doesn't the Delphi team design the Wi-Fi token or this other token or this other token? I was like, yeah, holy shit, I need to talk to these guys. So yeah, I got in touch with Anil, met Piers, met Yan, met the rest of the team, Colm as well, and yeah, that's how we really got started. But yeah, for the other part of what you said, so how are we thinking of growing the team? So the funny thing is, like, we're a team of maybe 12 now, but I see the team as basically 18,000, which is the strength of our entire community. Each of our game leads are from the community. All of our scholarship managers that are handling our thousands of scholars are actually community members. And what's special about it is that these guys are all empowered and are able to earn even though they are not basically salaried members of the team. So for example, each community manager, the scholarship manager, they are earning 20% of the SLP that the scholars generate. And on top of that, once we launch the YGG token, we've actually set aside 45% of the supply for basically giving out to the community over a long period of time to make sure that our interests are aligned and that our community, as much as possible, are the owners of the protocol, and yeah, not just the whales and investors who have a lot of money.
That's a bit of an alpha leak, but yeah, no, I couldn't be more excited. I remember, our first call. I mean, obviously the passion came off, and Delphi and our team, we've been really involved in the Axie community, but we're busy running a research consulting ventures division, so we aren't on the ground floor like you and Owl were. So even getting your perspectives about that community was just so fascinating, and I think I've told you time and time again, Gabby, and I'll say it publicly on this podcast, like, if I wasn't working on Delphi, Yield Guild would be like the one place I would dedicate all, my time and energy towards, right? And I think the most fascinating part about it is you can kind of bring in, you have an outlet for any type of person, right? So it's that university for people who do want to start learning and do want to start, making money and not kind of like, waste their time or energy going to university where they're majoring in something that they don't even know if they're gonna do. You get real life knowledge, as you're learning, and you get revenues for that. But at the same time, I think you guys have such a unique opportunity where you have an outlet for people who are really maybe gigabrains in the space, and maybe don't need to earn income from playing a game or anything, but they want to do something where they're having an impact, right, and actually helping move the space forward. Yeah, I mean, it'd be great to kind of hear, like, what are some, I mean, you obviously can accept basically, anyone to work at Yield Guild because it's such a vast operation, but like, what type of people are you looking to join? Because I think that would be great to let people hear on this pod as well.
Yeah, we have such I would say a diverse range of activities as a kind of social guild that is DAO, that is part investments, that has comes attached with a large community. So for example, one of the roles that we're hiring now is an esports program manager. And this is especially after our last round, which was invested in and led by Bitcraft, which is basically kind of like the OG esports people in the world, right? We've been getting a lot of guidance from them on how to build an esports program. And this is important for us because we think that NFT gaming esports will be really huge someday. And we want to be at the ground floor of that. And how it's important for us is like a branding exercise. For example, if I'm a scholar from the Philippines or Brazil coming in, and there may be eventually like many different guilds that they may want to join, we want to have the world-class NFT esports winning team. And for the scholar to say like, hey, I may be a scholar now, but I want to be world champion someday. And we want to be able to build that path where I come in as a player with skill and no money and end up eventually being a champion. So that's one example of what we're building. Another is that basically we're doing what is basically early stage investing in games, right? And that comes with a very different skill, and it comes with evaluating these games that are coming out, looking at tokenomics, looking at how value will accrue to kind of the game's economy, and if there's a token involved. So that is a very different skill level as well. There's a bunch of operational roles that we have, like not only within the core team, but also in each of the games themselves. And each game is a little bit different, which requires kind of different skills. For Axie, you need a little bit of that kind of Hearthstone card based strategy where you kind of know which meta you're playing, which cards you're going to be using, and kind of being good at timing that. Yeah, and in different games, then you will also need different skills. So Zedrun, for example, yeah, we have one manager that is kind of breeding horses, studying the traits, and then figuring out how to raise those profitably for the guild. And yeah, so like different people are drawn to different parts of the operation, and we kind of try to look within the community to see which ones are super passionate about it, and we kind of just give them the leeway to run away with their skills and interest in the guild.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think like, as you were saying all that, I was kind of like smiling because, I think Yield Guild mirrors Delphi Digital in a lot of different ways, right? Where at Delphi, our main product is kind of this pool of intellectual capital and just like finding the best talent. And, we can, have all these different use cases where we can siphon them off into research, consulting, ventures, etc. So, when we interview at Delphi, we always say, like, what's your dream role, right? Like every day when you wake up, what wouldn't feel like work to you that, that you can kind of excel at, and we can kind of craft that role out for you here. And I think Yield Guild's in this very, even almost even better position because it's all like you go to the gamers and say, what's your dream, role in the gaming space? And, this can actually be your job now. And you can siphon them off into, all these different ways, even like, fund management, right? And, the esports angle is, I think, one that people don't even realize Yield Guild is gonna, tap into and probably dominate quicker than, anyone else can even get up and running. Yeah, I think the Yield Guild flywheel is like probably one of my favorite, aspects of, what got us really excited as well. Like, Yan, you want to maybe dive into, what all these different, ways to look at what YGG really is here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so going into kind of one of them, obviously, you've built up this massive user base across a lot of different areas. And so what's, I think, especially unique with crypto, rather gaming and crypto, is that, we're tapping into a completely different user base. And so as games launch and they come online, part of how they gain momentum. And so, the general economies for a lot of these games is you use the token initially to kind of bootstrap players in the early days and really incentivize adoption. And so you kind of hit escape velocity with the games where, and that's part of kind of what they build into the model. And so it's like a core necessity for the game itself. And here you have Yield Guild that's sitting with, a massive amount of users that are playing crypto games, and some of them are playing because it's fun, some of them are playing to make a living, and there's that kind of combination that makes it really beneficial for both users. And now each additional game that comes into the space, it's beyond in their best interest to partner with Yield Guild in some way, to plug into the community, to integrate, to learn. And so obviously, as you guys deal with more and more games, you start to see what works, what doesn't. And so they want to tap in and integrate with you guys in every single way. There's a massive user base to plug into. They can learn from what you guys have seen in the game. They're able to kind of understand what works and realistically what doesn't. And I think it also helps the users themselves because the players can now, the members of the Yield Guild can have a choice. Do I want to play this game? Is it more profitable to play this game? Am I better at a certain game? And so everyone kind of gets to optimize for their ideal situation. And then so I think it becomes a really healthy way for new games to kind of join the space. And it also just makes it really possible for new games to join the space, where before they had to individually deal with finding community and finding players. And now, the probability of success for all of these games gets incrementally higher as Yield Guild grows.
100%. That's one of the aspects that I love the most, is like, providing these structured engagement opportunities for this still nascent space. I mean, obviously all of us who are in it see what's coming and have that degree of conviction, but for many it's, there's still a long way to go on that front. So I think that's one of the really exciting aspects for sure. And as Yan was alluding to, the kind of pedigree of, sophisticated users that understand this stuff, the concentration of them in Yield Guild at this point is almost a little unfair. I wonder how you think about over time, rival guilds that, do similar things emerging, because that's a world that I look forward to, right? Where you're operating across multiple virtual economies and you're this dominant force and you have all the best players and all the best resources and you're generating a lot of yield. But I look forward to the day it becomes competitive. So wonder, Gabby, whether you can comment on that at all.
So we think of ourselves as a meta guild. I mean, I think it is healthy for guilds to have competition in games. You definitely do not want an IOI situation wherein it's basically just one group dominating everything. That said, the way to think of Yield Guild is not one monolithic guild, but actually a series of very powerful cells that is empowered by the community, the greater community of Yield Guild, and the infrastructure we have, the incentivization around our token, and the culture that we have as well around the guild itself. I don't think people really understand outside of the Delphi team and our investors about the size and the scale and impact that we are really going for at Yield Guild. We don't want just to be a gamer community that is present in different NFT games around the world. What we see with our impact is that if we are able to onboard millions of gamers around the world, we are going to be a competitor to Uber, to Lyft, to Grab, Tokopedia. So not just to game communities. They, instead of driving taxis, they will be driving axes. Basically, they'll be farming in virtual land, and we'll be competing with the work that people are having in their real lives. When people realize they can log on to a game and actually make 2 to 3 times more money, and on top of that have equity basically, or ownership of the community that they belong to, I think a lot of these jobs will be basically not that interesting to people around the world. So that's where we see ourselves, and we think that Yield Guild will basically be the major economic force in the metaverse.
Yeah, and just one thing I want to touch on there, which was the example you kind of brought about with, on one side the Uber comparison, and then also the owning equity. And I think just to kind of zoom in and understand, so the play to earn component has 2 facets. One is the consumable assets, and then the other is the game incentivizing players to come play and the rewarding of tokens. And so the way to kind of think about that is, with Uber, you have the business model, or from the investment side, as VCs come in, throw a bunch of money at it. That's used to subsidize a lot of costs for them to grow as quickly as possible and achieve scale where costs can kind of make sense. And so the idea is the VC dollars subsidize the drivers, and that's kind of how it works. Here, it's a similar mechanism, but a different distribution, in the sense that you now subsidize and incentivize the drivers, the users, through equity in the actual project. So the idea of, you imagine Uber, rather than subsidizing drivers through VC cash, is able to subsidize them by giving them very small slices of equity in Uber. And so now, not only is it like you don't have this kind of consumer, it's just a different relationship, where now the players themselves have a massive vested interest in kind of seeing this succeed, and it's the natural way to build communities as well, and create longevity and stickiness with the users. But now the users themselves, are in the way that the equity is kind of transferred is they own the token, they can stake it, and all that in-game spend gets put in a community pool and gradually distributed to token holders and used for other incentives to grow the game. So every dollar is spent in game is kind of returned to the community. and the players themselves are part owners in the game.
Yeah, I almost want to like leave some pause there just so that all sinks in everyone, because I think that's such a like, you know, important aspect of it. I think like, you know, Gabby, like when you think about like, you know, we've had so many, I remember, you know, back in October when we were, you know, you and I were going around shopping this to, you know, every crypto fund that we could, you know, talk to. And now like, you know, you have so much interest from, you know, pretty much everyone in the game. Like, what is that moment that, you know, you think sparks interest, like like makes it all click for everyone now, right? Like what has maybe changed in the past few months that people are like, okay, this is, you know, this is the future that the world's going to be building on, and I want to be, you know, a part of it, because you know something has changed in the past 6 months, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think a big part of it is that I think kind of unique to kind of the crypto scene. I've actually seen a lot of idealism in the crypto investors, and releasing the documentary has helped. But just telling our story of how we are growing the crypto networks by onboarding people who are new to crypto via games, and then having them earn an income, which, you know, maybe a small amount to some whales, but especially meaningful for these users, meaning we are really harnessing the full power of blockchain and crypto networks to do good in this world. It's something that I've seen kind of remarkably across a lot of the crypto investors that I've seen. And now that the story is getting out, and now that we're actually starting to talk to some of the more kind of traditional tech VC funds, they're attracted by the kind of growth in this kind of future of work story where we're onboarding people to crypto networks, and basically having equal economic opportunity at at a growth rate that is, yeah, pretty much staggering, because now you can reach people from around the world, wherein your network effects used to be kind of limited to maybe certain countries or certain cities even. But you know, we are an 8-month-old DAO basically, but we're operating in many different cities around the world simultaneously, because we have community managers there, and this is just a model that we can basically scale around the world at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's actually important to dig into, where, you know, I think I remember a lot of the pushback that we received from maybe, you know, crypto native funds who are looking at DeFi protocols where, you know, you have these lines of code that can become infinitely scalable. Whereas, you know, Yield Guild has this huge human coordination aspect, which, you know, humans are the worst, right? Like they're trying to solve human coordination is very difficult. So it might not be as scalable as something like a DeFi protocol, but what's fascinating when you talk to, you know, Yan and I have been talking to a bunch of big family offices and big, you know, traditional VC funds, where Deal Guild is probably one of the first, you know, protocols and projects that we bring up to them, because one, it shows like that real world impact. You know, you can't, it's not no longer possible to say, you know, crypto's not positively impacting people's lives, right? But at the same time, with this, you know, DAO structure and the tooling that we can that we're going to be leveraging, it actually is way more scalable than, you know, human coordination in like a centralized fashion, right? So it's like sits in the middle where you get the benefits of almost both.
Yeah, the human coordination is definitely a hard part. Like for example, pretty much any DeFi protocol will probably defeat us in terms of TVL, but we don't look at our protocol in terms of TVL. We look at it, for example, like what's the AUM of the NFT assets that we have, what are the fees that those are generating, and most importantly, like how many lives have we actually made better. So it's not in terms of, you know, people as statistics anymore. How many users have you acquired? We're actually looking at like how many lives have we changed, and how have we changed their lives for the better. And as those stories come out, you see that the work that we are doing is actually really relevant for this world.
Yeah, I guess like I'm trying to think, you know, there's so many different ways we can, you know, go to next. Like, you know, what are, you know, say the next 6 months of Yield Guild, right? Like obviously we've been, you know, working with you guys hand in hand. I think there are some exciting things on, you know, right around the corner, but you know, what do the next 6 months look like for you guys?
So we're releasing the token next month, and it's very important for us to do it at this point. We wanted to build an organic community without a token first, and I think we've succeeded in doing that. But we wanted to put the token out relatively early because we kind of wanted to have the community to have ownership of the project as early as possible. The most exciting thing in my mind is the community mining program that we are introducing later this year. So we don't have a typical liquidity mining program in DeFi where a bunch of whales lock their liquidity in and then they earn our token and then they kind of just sell them when they're done and then they move to the next protocol. So we have what is called a community mining program, which is basically a meta quest system overlaid on top of our partner games like Axie, like League of Kingdoms, like Splinterlands, and you get to perform quests in those games. And that's how you receive the YGG token. And yeah, this will be our primary method of delivering our token to our players, our guild members. That means you have to be an active member of the guild if you wanted to earn tokens and not buy them.
Yeah, I think it would be great as well if we could elaborate a bit on, where the token kind of sits in the ecosystem and some of the core sort of, use cases around that.
Sure. So the primary way to think about the YGG token is that it's an index of our farmable assets in the metaverse. It is actually pretty complex, so it's good that we're talking about it. YGG is a DAO of DAOs, and through most of the people I've talked to, we're probably the first implementation of this, in that each of the games that we are working with is going to be its own sub-DAO, as we call it, with its own token. YGG, as kind of the mother DAO, will own a portion of that, and a portion will be owned by the players who are actually playing each specific game. So if I'm a gamer and I really care about Axie, I want to own a portion of the YGG Axie token. If I'm super passionate about Illuvium, I want to own part of the YGG ILV token. And that gives you kind of a localized feeling wherein I'm just not just part of a 20,000 person guild. I'm part owner of this game that I'm playing with maybe 20 of my friends, right? But as the guild itself, the guild owns a huge part of the token of each sub-DAO, which means it's almost like a kind of Berkshire Hathaway like real estate conglomerate structure where you have a mother entity that owns significant states in different subsidiaries that are earning yield, that have assets. And this is a very, I would say, complex structure that I don't think has ever been done before. But if you think about this over time, as the metaverse grows, we will be home to the greatest collection of yield-producing assets, NFTs, in the best virtual worlds and games. And owning the YGG token will basically give you a slice of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's definitely one of the super cool parts. And it's kind of like, as you alluded to earlier, this sort of multicellular organism, and that's how it scales so much better, right? You give people that granularity, they can sort of choose in which capacity they do engage. One thing I'd like to touch on a bit more as well is sort of the the kind of guild treasury overall, that sort of war chest. If we could elaborate on that a bit, because obviously, again, you guys have this sort of highly educated kind of guild members who are kind of the boots on the ground and often first to these games. Like Yield Guild really has sort of unparalleled insights into what the next great games are going to be and what the prime assets, and whether that's virtual real estate or whether there's a productive sort of functional NFTs. Would love if you could just talk a bit about the protocol treasury overall and kind of its size and performance and what the real objective is with it.
Okay, so just a brief history of our fundraising. We raised 1.3 million in the seed round last, I would say, October, and then closed another 4 million just last month. So we've raised 5 million total. But actually, in that original 1.3 million we raised, before we got the next round, we were actually at around at least $4 million in AUM. A big part of it is that we made some early bets in games that we really believed in. So for example, we bought a lot of land in Axie because we knew that land gameplay was going to yield their excess governance token, which is massively valuable. We bought some land in Sandbox, which, if it comes anywhere close to being kind of the Roblox of blockchain, then it's going to be massively valuable. And the land itself, I think, has has grown around 10x from when we bought it. So with the treasury that we have, a big part of that really goes towards investing in the NFT assets that is kind of the core of the business model that we do. And then, yeah, with the rest of the treasury, it's a mix of, we also buy governance tokens of some of these games in the ecosystems that we believe in. And the reason for that is that if we're heavily investing in the ecosystem of a game, so if we're buying NFTs, if we're bringing our community to a game, we want to capture a part of that value that we're creating through its associated governance token. So that's why we actually own a lot of AXS. We own the SAND token, we own the REV token as well. So it means that we're kind of an index broadly of the metaverse. And I guess the assets that we own are a reflection of what we believe the best yield-bearing assets are in the metaverse.
Super cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's such a important, part too, because like, a lot of people and funds view Delphi as like, this kind of premier like crypto gaming investing fund, and we have, all this good IP around it. Really the secret of that is just, I mean, obviously, Piers, Column, and, now Jeremy P as well. But really the secret is like we're pinging Gabby and, the Yield Guild team whenever we're DDing games and saying, hey, you guys like this, and, what are your thoughts here? And that unparalleled insight is just like, it's so ridiculous. I think, one other point I wanted to, bridge into too is like kind of like the, last, I don't remember when it was, maybe August or September, maybe Yan, you remember, our team, did this in very stealth mode. We, purchased, 4 or 5 axes for, I believe it was 153 or 160 grand. And, for us, these were, we kind of like wanted to corner that axie market as far as like some of our favorite and kind of the most valuable, digital battle pets, we called them in that post. That we thought were going to be most lucrative, right, long term, and had kind of the most interesting attributes. For us, as I said, we're busy running a company, doing research consulting ventures. No matter how much fun we have playing Axie, which has distracted us, many times over the past few years, at the same time, we can't dedicate all this time to leveraging those assets, right? So for us, Yield Guild also solved that problem of whales in the space who, and I think this actually is a great, kind of window into thinking about, the past few years of crypto gaming and why it hasn't reached mainstream adoption is because, the opportunity cost of, people in crypto's time is so high where, us, our friends and funds in the space that, their time is better served looking for the next, 100x, low market cap, or, just the next, farm or something like that, where they can earn some ridiculous yield. Sorry, I was getting a call. And on the flip side, Yield Guild actually bridges that where you give our assets and these assets that are immensely valuable and lucrative in the game, and help provide that to people who may not be able to actually purchase those assets for 163 grand or something like that. Like maybe Yan, you can give some context before Gabby goes into like how powerful this is.
Yeah, no, the idea is so part of the kind of the thought process behind what we were investing in, why, was to understand, even zooming out, Axie is still in its really early days, and so there's going to be a lot of kind of evolution and in terms of the abilities and the moves, and also the game itself is always constantly rebalancing, which I think is really key to ensuring its longevity, that it always stays competitive. And I think they do a really good job of kind of balancing the meta. But our idea was to look into and understand, based on the kind of the mystics that exist and the rarity of what's out there relative to basically trying to find some of the really rare ones within like the mystic group. And since those are already limited, the idea was, if we can really find those, there's potentially going to be a lot of upside. But at the same time, part of our concern was how do we get some utility. So the idea, like NFT investing is always tough. So, like on the art side, it's I think you have to be a bit more ahead of the trend, or really predicting some like underlying smaller trends. Whereas like we got more comfortable around this because we thought that these were like functional NFTs were something that we're really comfortable getting behind. We know that there's always going to be underlying utility, and as the game itself grows, the value of these should naturally appreciate as effectively more people are seeking a shrinking pie. And so the idea that was kind of the logic there. And then even in our conversation with Gabby, and I'll kind of let him expand on what they're able to do there, was just another reason we got really comfortable around it, and another reason we thought that these would have potentially more value, where it's not necessarily just limited to the individual who owns them to really get value out of them, but there's the ability to kind of unlock more.
Yeah. So so with what we're doing, so right now we're actually breeding our axes and then lending that out to our player base. But when we're doing this, we're basically limited by the amount of capital that we have to acquire NFTs. One of the major things that we're preparing for is allowing anyone with their NFTs to be able to basically stake them with Yield Guild and have our very large player community use them. And when that is unlocked, it basically unlocks millions of dollars worth of NFTs to be matched with our ever-growing player community. And now suddenly we're not bound by the money that we've raised, and our AUM can basically grow 10x, 100x because we have outside capital coming in, providing assets that are managed by the guild, lent out to our players, providing opportunities to thousands of people around the world. So yeah, I think that is going to be absolutely massive, and that's where we're headed.
Yeah, I love that aspect for sure. The ability to kind of turn those otherwise idle assets into something productive. And again, it's just engaging all the assets out there. And I'm always skeptical of using the word lubricate, but lubricating this whole economy and growing ecosystem and whatnot. But yeah, I'm curious, Gabby. I mean, obviously you've got like pretty much the best insight into all of this stuff, also with the traditional game developer background. Like, what do you see as the path of evolution, on what timeline can we kind of reasonably expect some of this stuff to really continue to break out? I mean, obviously Axie, even very recently, was significantly smaller than it is now. It's really going, vertical in its growth. Are we going to see more of this on what kind of timeline? And yeah, I'm curious how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, I've been a game developer for 2 decades, and I've seen kind of major trends unlock. So for example, when I was doing PC games in 2003, people were laughing at mobile games. And then kind of 2009, 2010, free-to-play started becoming a thing. And it was actually 2 games. It was Clash of Clans in the West and Candy Crush that made it absolutely massive. And then suddenly everyone wanted to make a free-to-play game. And now with what we're seeing with play to earn, I think what we need to see are really 1 or 2 absolutely massive success stories. And I absolutely think Axie is this #1 success story where, they're growing at basically 20-30% a week. They did a 5% growth day. Like the numbers are absolutely popping, and now they're on track for something like a $1.4 billion run rate, and the eyes are starting to turn, and they're like, holy shit, like this business model actually works. You can see that players are investing on user acquisition of other players, and this is language that game developers can understand. I was talking to another game developer last week, and how I explained it was that game developers who are usually spending millions and millions of dollars on UA, paying them to Facebook and Google, with Play to Earn, you are externalizing your user acquisition cost to your player investors that are investing in assets in your game so that they can bring on more players for you. If you think about it that way, then like, holy shit, who wouldn't want that in their community, right? So like, I don't know about like timeline because things always take longer than you expect, but I don't know, like with you, Piers, I think you also talk to a lot of these big publishers and developers. Like, what's going on in their heads?
Yeah, I think as you've alluded to, kind of cat's out the bag. Everyone needs to be paying attention to it at this point. I think that kind of explosive, proliferative power of those shared economics, of those evangelical forces that are unlocked, through that shared ownership, those aren't going away. Quite obviously, I think from like the consumer perspective, like as soon as you see it once, maybe even if it's not a game that otherwise would, appeal to you yet, like once you see it, once that consumer psychology shifts, like there's no way we're going back, I don't think. I think that they're definitely aware of it. Having spoken to a bunch of them, obviously we've got people like Ubisoft who have already been in the space for a couple of years. They've been experimenting. I'm fairly confident that they're, starting to feel like the time might be right. And then, the others, it's kind of similar story. It seems, pretty obvious that if you're to sit on your hands on this stuff, then, could end up in trouble. And I totally think anyone that does and refuses to, ultimately once this does play out in its fullest form, is going to be in a tricky spot on that front. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to, kind of also just talk about once more, some of these opportunities. We talk about the metaverse and how we're going to evolve into these sort of increasingly pervasive and immersive digital environments. I don't think it's always going to be just games. I think increasingly all this stuff's going to blend together. I wonder whether you can sort of comment on that at all. Especially obviously in the context of Yield Guild and where you guys sit.
Yeah, the most exciting part for me is that I think what we're doing now is that we're really building the fundamental building blocks of the open metaverse. So first you have the NFTs, which are your basically durable assets where that you can kind of build game experiences on. With Yield Guild, you have communities that are basically recruiting players, these people from around the world, and bringing them into the metaverse so that they can start their journey from there. Even if you don't have money, you can have your metaverse identity. You can be lent your kind of first 3 axes. You can start playing the game, and then over time, people will maybe buy their own plot of virtual land. So I really see this as where the future of work is going. I think in 10 years we probably wouldn't be logging on to a static website or going on Zoom to have our meetings. We'll be logging into our 3D avatars, going in VR and having a conversation such as this. You may show your real face, you may be showing your avatar, but I believe that we are just really headed for a kind of Ready Player One situation. Like, I don't know if it's 5, 10, 15 years, like who can really tell, but the building blocks of that are already here. And the position that we play as Yield Guild is that we want to have that metaverse available to anyone who would want to enter it, and that's why we want to be kind of the onboarding, the what we call the recruitment agency of the metaverse.
Yeah, I totally agree. I kind of view it as obviously, despite my best efforts at trying to get these two Luddites to buy a virtual reality headset, that side of things isn't quite there yet. The mediums through which we interact with this stuff obviously still have a long way to go for at least perhaps the mainstream perception of like what that stuff should be. But I think the important thing is that even though you're not necessarily immersed in it yet, like all of this financial infrastructure and technology that's underpinning it and is going to support it, this economic membrane, like it's all being built right now. You guys are building it, like it's all in motion already. And like, again, the medium through which you interact with it might not be super sophisticated yet, but all the bricks are being laid. And like, for me, that's one of the really exciting parts of it. And obviously you guys are a big driving force in that, hence my, infallible enthusiasm for Yield Guild. Excited to see where it all goes. I don't know whether Yan, Anil, you wanted to hop in with anything.
Yeah, I think Piers and Gabby, you guys both share this almost identical view of like, this is the metaverse in the future, etc. And I always kind of like look at my own life, and I wake up, I'm checking my phone, I'm on a laptop all day. I'm like, I feel like we're already part of this metaverse, and Yield Guild is just like exactly where the future is going to be. But you guys are already there, not just building it, but you guys like just the way that it's being formed, right? Like you guys are building it with what you guys are building towards. Like it's kind of like a beautiful aspect. I mean, I think Delphi and our whole team has been so like proud of obviously backing Gabby, Owl, Beryl. Like your team has been fascinating, backing a cause and like mission, and one with the vision of yours is just like the most exciting thing to us. Like and obviously we're really excited for the YGG token to come out next month, although I think that Quest, the Quest mining is going to be really distracting towards the Delphi digital team. So, you know, that the research might be shaky that month or so. But yeah, I mean, Gabby, obviously, you know, we really appreciate the time. Like, any closing, you know, words or anything you want to say before we hop off? Obviously, Yan, I'll let you go before we, you know, go to Gabby, but obviously, you know, always a fan, Gabby, always a pleasure.
Yeah, and I was just say it's tough to assume it's anything besides inevitable. You know, if you just think about how quickly it's grown now, and then on a longer term basis, just general demographic shifts and how every you know all the younger generations is all digitally native, and this is just going to seem completely natural to them. And so yeah, it's a transition that's happening regardless.
Okay, it's hard to close this. Been an awesome conversation, but I guess looking back on my career, where I started making games purely for entertainment, coming into crypto and learning about the basics of basically what blockchain, digital ledger, what it's used for, combining that with NFTs, and now being able to combine DeFi elements and earn yield, and then use a DAO structure to start building basically the metaverse. There's a lot of concepts in there, and we're actually kind of getting progressively more and more towards science fiction. And for me to be able to wake up every day and kind of work towards making this science fiction a reality for the rest of the world, it's just the most amazing job in the world. That's really all I can say.
Yeah,
I love it.
absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. Awesome, guys.
Well, yeah, Gabby, echoing Anil's sentiment, it's always a pleasure. You're always a source of inspiration and enthusiasm around this stuff. And yeah, I think speak for all of us when we say we couldn't be more excited to be on this journey with you. And look forward to finally meeting in Meet Space at some point, hopefully this calendar year. Yeah, having a beer and discussing all things Yield Guild. Gabby, appreciate you taking the time. Anil, Yan, likewise.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a pleasure.
Thanks.
Check the show notes for the Twitter and doc, and you know, all the links to all the stuff that we've been talking about here.
Yeah,
There's a
all
lot
of
to dive into.
in the show notes.
We do that right.